So as the creator of the top SaaS starter on GitHub, I get a lot of people asking me for advice on building a SaaS with AI. And I noticed that people get stuck for a lot of the same reasons. So I thought I'd put together a video that would show you how to avoid these bad patterns and use AI coding tools to build a SaaS confidently. The most common issues with building a SaaS with AI is that either you get the first 70% done very easily and the last 30% becomes next to impossible. Or in the case of this guy from the Vibe Coding subreddit, you build something that works, that has customers, but now it's a complete mess. And anytime you touch one piece, something else breaks. So how do you avoid this? And you avoid this by staying the architect, right? You should be the architect, but it's very easy to give up that role to AI because AI can seem so good at what it's doing, and it is so good at what it does, that it's easy to get lazy and just kind of, let it make all the decisions for you. But that's something you want to avoid. And to avoid that, I have basically outlined 5 tips that we're going to go to. These will be the 5 sections of the video. The first one is giving AI a solid foundation and rails to run on. The second is prompting like a pro. It's basically, you need to learn how to have a conversation with AI to make decisions effectively. Number 3 is understanding the underlying systems. You want to understand what you're building on top of. SaaS is just many different systems pieced together in a creative way. And even if you don't know how to code, you should understand those underlying systems. Next is you want to build in vertical chunks. I'll explain what this means, but this is a really great technique that I use all the time. And this allows you to then move on to the final point, which is you need to verify each of these vertical chunks as you build so that you don't get stuck with the bigger problems later on. So yeah, let's get into it. We're going to go over all 5 of these in order. Okay, so we said that you want to give your agent rails to follow. And what does this mean? This means that whenever you're building software, you have a million different ways that you can achieve the same thing. So rather than making your agent decide or guess at every turn what it should do, give it a predetermined path it should follow, and it will more likely get to your end destination or reach your goals without running into issues or without going down the wrong path, basically. So a great way to do this is to give it a solid code base to start with. And this means using a SaaS boilerplate template or a SaaS starter, it's called. And boilerplate templates are basically just a collection of code where all the different pieces of an app that are kind of just generic to an app, like signing up users, wiring up payments, sending emails, all these decisions are already made and they're already wired up for you. And all you have to do is then add your unique feature set. So that's what you see here in this graphic here. You just focus on your unique feature set. The other benefit of using a SaaS boilerplate starter is that it gives the agent patterns that it can reference and imitate. It can see and reference other patterns in the code base and say, okay, cool, this is how it should be made. This is how they wired up payments. I just need to slip that feature in right here. And there are a lot of great options out there, like ShipFast is one SaaS boilerplate starter that's very popular. Superstarter is another, but these cost about $300 a piece. And I am a creator and maintainer of OpenSaaS, and we've been working on this project for about 4 years maybe now. And because it's free and open source, a bunch of people contribute to it, constantly improving it. So I can attest to the quality of this code base. It's become the most popular SaaS boilerplate starter on GitHub with over 14,500 stars. So I'm sure that no matter which one you choose, you can't really go wrong. This gives great code rails to your agent to work within. So yeah, use one of these. All right, the next set of rails you want to give your agent are knowledge rails. And the best way to do that is to always use the official up-to-date documentation of the tools you're using and pass those to your agent whenever the agent is building a feature or working on an issue that touches that tool. So OpenSaaS, for example, has a documentation site. So we're looking at the human-friendly version of the docs here. And these aren't really the best for agents because agents have a working memory, which is called context. And a website like this, when an agent fetches it, it'll have a bunch of fluff. It has a bunch of HTML and JavaScript code embedded in there. And it makes it harder for the agent to pinpoint the exact piece of information that it should be referencing while working. So what a lot of tools do now is they have an llms.txt URL, which provides a raw text LLM or AI friendly version of those documentation. So here, another example, Stripe, the payment provider, it has, its landing page for humans. And then we have the LLM's text version. So you want to always provide the agent with those URLs so that it has the best possible information to work with. Okay, let me show you what that looks like in practice, because you probably don't want to be pasting in the LLM's text URL of all the different tools you're using each time you give a prompt to your agent. So it doesn't matter which agent you're using, Claude Code, Codex, Cursor, they all use pretty much the same principles. And that is, they have something called memory files and skill files. And the reason they have these is because, long story short, agents don't have memory. So they can't remember stuff, and they need to be reminded all the time of the most important instructions. And the best place to put those important instructions are in your memory files or your skill files. A memory file like agents.md, which you see here, this is the one that comes with Open SaaS. It's very simple. With a lot of information, they can kind of get confused, or they don't follow the instructions very closely. So if you can, keep it as short as possible. But here I've put in just information on how to access the Open SaaS documentation so that when a new user gets this boilerplate template, they can get it started and running pretty easily. And the agent has the access and knows where to access the correct LLM's text URL and how to fetch the guide and then move on from there. So this is great to get started with your Open SaaS template and get it up and running. But as you start to build out your SaaS, you might need to reference different tools. It might not always follow the instructions in the main memory file as it gets too long. So a great place to do that instead is to create skill files. And what skill files allow you to do is, like here, as you can see, I've already put in the prompt, you use a / command, and this skill I've titled fetch docs. And you tell it which docs to fetch and then what to do. And so what the fetch docs skill looks like is right here. It basically, at the core of it, has a list of the correct LLM's text URLs for each tool that I'm using, and say, okay, fetch docs for that tool. It will then find in that skill file here the correct URL. It'll hit that URL. It'll find the correct guide that's necessary for the task at hand, and then it will use the most up-to-date official information from the OpenAI docs, for example, to help you build the chatbot feature that you want to build in your app. All right, so you've got Rails for your agent. It's time to start prompting the agent and actually building the thing. So what does prompting like a pro look like? I tend to think that it's a lot simpler than other people make it out to be. In essence, you're basically just having a conversation with your agent. And why do I say it's just a conversation? Well, I think the biggest mistake people make is they sit down, they start a new session, and they say, build me X or do X. And that's not really the approach you want to take. A lot of times, you want to be the architect, you want to be in control, but you might not know what it is that you want to build or how the thing should be built. There might be many different strategies that you've never dealt with before, you've never touched before, that the agent will know. So the point is tell the agent what it is, what ideas you have, and have a conversation with it and figure out what kind of uncertainties still exist, talk about and brainstorm some strategies, and like come to an agreement together on what direction you should go in from there. So you think of it like having a conversation with a really smart, really patient friend that knows all there is to know about software engineering and product development. Within this idea of having a conversation with your agent, there are two types of prompts that I basically use. There is the clarify first prompt, and then there is the brainstorm with pros and cons kind of prompt. The clarify first prompt is basically that. It's tell your idea to the agent and tell it to interview you until you really come to a complete understanding together of what it is that you're trying to achieve. And that's it. You just have it ask you questions, ask if it really understands, ask if there's more uncertainties, and just keep going from there until you both drill down and get to an understanding of what it is that you're trying to do here. The brainstorm with pros and cons prompt, a lot of times for product ideas or for feature ideas or implementation strategies, you might not know what kind of options there are out there. So ask your agent. Tell it to come up with 10 different variations, for example, along with their pros and cons. And this might help you both together find a strategy to go forward that you both agree on, that sounds good, that fits your requirements, whatever those might be. Okay, so as a simple example, I've got a new open SaaS app, and I told Claude that I'd like to add a chatbot feature to my app. Ask me any questions you may have so that we reach a mutual understanding before moving forward. And this is a very general, very simple example, but it will illustrate the process you should be using. Okay, so it's popped up a questionnaire here, and it's asking what's the primary purpose of this chatbot? And I think it's going to be customer support. So there we go. Which LLM provider should we use? I would say let's do OpenAI. And should it be a floating widget or a dedicated chat page? I think a floating widget would be best. Should conversations persist? Yes, let's save them to the database. And then we go ahead and submit our answers. And you don't have to stop there. You can go deeper. You can ask follow-up questions. And this is basically what this kind of clarifying prompt should look like. All right, now that we've clarified with the agent what we want our chatbot feature to be like, I'm asking here to help me think of 3 implementation strategies along with their pros and cons, and we will decide on the best one before implementing. So this is, again, a simple example of the pros and cons, or the brainstorming with pros and cons style prompt that I use a lot. It's not limited to 3 implementation strategies. You can ask it for more. You can say 10, or go through and, as many as you want. I think for this example here, it's probably okay. 3 to 5 is usually good. And here you go. It's already coming out with a bunch of different strategies. And I can then do more research on them, ask more questions, and we can decide on one that might fit my requirements. Because let's say I have a certain budget that I don't want to go over, and I need to take that into consideration there. I can find the one that fits best. And you see here that the agent even included its own recommendation. So it said, go with strategy 2 using the Vercel AI SDK for your frequently asked questions bot. The next important point to building a SaaS with AI without getting stuck is that you have to understand the underlying systems upon which your app is built. So think of it this way. You don't need to completely understand the code, but you need to understand what it is that's running your app. Because a SaaS app essentially is just a mix of tools that already exist out there, put together in a creative way that solves some problem, right? So you need to understand that at least the basics of the things that are getting put together, like what is a database, what is a payments provider, and how it generally works. And this will help you to not only understand what's being built by your agent, but will also help you to debug and ask the right questions so that you go in the right direction when you're trying to fix issues, right? So knowing the fundamentals of what your agent built for you can help you go a lot further and can help you get unstuck a lot. And I can jump into a quick little prompt example using something that we already touched on earlier. Remember, we were talking about fetching docs. So I can say, fetch the docs from Stripe and explain at a high level how the payments work. Tell it to get the LLM optimized docs for you and look at your actual boilerplate starter template code base that you have and have it explain things to you starting from a very high level. You can say, explain like I'm 5, explain at a high level, and then go deeper from there. And if all this seems kind of overwhelming and you really want your hand held through the entire learning process, you can check out this thing I'm building called Open Vibe, which is built on top of Open SaaS, and it turns your agent into a ultimate SaaS building assistant and tutor. So it gets you started with Open SaaS, gets it set up, and teaches you everything you need to know along the way. So if you go to openvibe.sh, here's the landing page. You can check it out, how it works, the problems it solves, and all the lessons live in your agent. It walks you through everything step by step, getting everything running and teaching you all the basics you need to know to build and launch a SaaS. Let's move on to actually building. And the approach I love using is telling the agent to plan an implementation in a vertical slice approach. And basically what that means is we want to build a small, very simple working version of that feature from the very beginning that we can test. So it should touch all parts of the app, all parts of the stack, from the user interface on what you see in the browser to saving data in the database. So the feature should actually work. I think the best way to do this is to show it by example. And if you go to OpenSaaS, if you start a new template, or even if you go to opensas.sh and you log in, you'll be taken to this AI day scheduler app. It's just a demo app that shows you how to use some AI capabilities. And what it does is you put in your tasks for the day, how much time each task should take, and it generates a more detailed schedule for you with priorities. So let's say I want to add a feature to this and I want to make it shareable. I want to be able to click a button and send a link to a friend and they can see my schedule that I've generated for the day. What I wouldn't do is go to the agent and say, I want to make the schedule shareable, build it. What I do instead is I would come to the agent, or what I did already is I came to Claude Code and I said, if I wanted to add a share schedule feature to the demo app, what would be a good implementation plan with small milestones, one goal each, that uses a vertical slice approach? So it gave me a recommendation already. It's saying, here's milestone 1. We're just going to read a schedule by its ID at a public URL. So you'll be able to, the goal is you go to /schedule/ and the ID in the database of that generated schedule, and you should be able to see it. And that's it. That's the first milestone. It will create that functionality, and you'll be able to test it by going to the URL and seeing if that works. Milestone 2 is that there's a share button. So you see, we're already building up in complexity. First, we just make sure that the sharing functionality works. Then we add a button and we do some extra data manipulation in the database. And then we move on to milestone 3, which creates a share token and all this other stuff. So this is a really great plan already. This is exactly how I like to do it. Small milestones that are vertically sliced, so they do something across the entire stack. They're testable, and they have one goal. So now this plan has some optional goals, whatever. At this point, I would tell it, yeah, save this plan to a file in our project directory, and that we can access later, so that later when I'm working, I can always say, like this here, at implementationplan.md, reference the plan and build milestone 2. Or maybe if I start work again another day, I can I stop work for the day and I start tomorrow. I can then say, reference, start a new session, reference the implementation plan and say, let's start where we finished yesterday with milestone 5 or whatever. Another great side effect of using this vertical slice approach with very small, testable, one goal-oriented milestones is that it's much easier to manage the context of your agent. And what does this mean? We've talked about context before already. Agents don't have working memory. They only have a context in the current session that they're in. And the way that you can kind of give them memory is through skills files and through the agents.md or claude.md memory file. There's some more detailed ways if you want to look at the Claude Code or your agent's docs. You can get deep into the weeds with this stuff, but that's generally the approach. And the other way is we talked about doing this implementation plan and having it write those milestones to a text file in your project that you can access and reference later. And that's great for context management because it's well known that as the context gets filled, so the working memory of the agent gets filled, the performance degrades slightly. So there's different schools of thought about how much context you should fill up. I like to keep it as little as possible. So the great thing is that you have options on how to do that. And one of those is referencing those implementation files and referencing your current code base, of course, which is why we talked about having good Rails in the beginning. I like to try and use each milestone as a new session. So clear the context by either using /clear or by using /compact. And then reference that implementation plan that you had from before and say, okay, now let's move on to milestone 3 or whichever milestone you might be. All right, now let's check out 2 different, more advanced verification and debugging techniques I'm going to show you first the more manual approach, and then I'll show you the agent-led approach, which will run your app, check out the code, the server logs, and even control the browser like a human would, and kind of do everything autonomously. I've just gone ahead and cloned a new instance of OpenSaaS, and I'm going to try and start it locally now. Just as a reference, if you need help installing and getting OpenSaaS started, if you want to follow along, in the docs there is a Getting Started section that you can reference. There's even a video that I made that will show you how to do that. So let's go ahead and run wasp start. And I know it's going to fail because of this import error here. And if I didn't know where this error was coming from, I could just copy and paste that error and literally paste it into Claude with no context. And Claude is very good at figuring this stuff out and will fix it. But that can be kind of tedious and for, going back and forth through different terminal windows. And there are sometimes errors that are really persistent or really difficult to debug through just vibe coding like this. So you can actually get the agent to do it all for you, run the app, go through everything, and you won't have to, you can just kind of take a hands-off approach. So let's just first, before I get into that, let's see if the app starts locally now that we copy and pasted the error over to Claude, and it should. Cool. So this is what the template will look like, should look like when you start a new one. Great. It's running. Let's go ahead and kill that process and the database, the Postgres database that's running, and we'll go back to Claude. And the cool thing about Claude is that it now has this thing called Run Skill Generator. So what this does is it learns how to run your app that you're working on and creates a skill that it can reference later so that it can run and control your app through the browser completely on its own. So what you do in this instance for OpenSaaS, a really good shortcut is when you start a new OpenSaaS instance, OpenSaaS will print this to your terminal. And these are instructions for getting your OpenSaaS app started. So all I do is I start a new OpenSaaS instance, or I clone a new OpenSaaS instance according to the docs that we looked at. And then I copy and paste those instructions, and then I just click enter, and this will take a few minutes for it to run through everything and figure out how to start the app. But once it does, it creates this Run OpenSaaS skill. And the cool thing is you can invoke this yourself, or you can just tell the agent to invoke it for you. And let me go ahead and put back that error in there, and I'll just say run OpenSaaS and fix the issue, right? And let's see what happens. Okay, so you see there, it found the issue when trying to run the app. So let's see if it fixed it. It's checking to see if there are any other issues. All right, and there it goes. It identified the issue and fixed it. Now it's trying to rerun the database and get started. And there you go. You see it's successfully started the app on its own. In order to do so, it had to fix the error. So this was, I fast forwarded a little bit through this part, but this was a complete hands-off approach, and this is a great way to give the reins over to your agent and get it to solve the issues you're having for you. All right, so there you have it. If you have any additional questions, you can go to the OpenSaaS website, click on documentation, and there is a Discord button. Go and head over to our Discord. We'd be happy to help. And yeah, thanks for watching.